So anxiety is the mind and the body's reaction to situations it perceives as stressful or dangerous, or sometimes just unfamiliar, like we've never experienced it before. So we all need a small amount of anxiety to survive and thrive. It can help us. It obviously helps us keep us safe. But if we have really intense or really prolonged periods of anxiety, that's when it becomes more debilitating or destructive. So that's when it can lead to some of the anxiety disorders. So your panic disorder is having frequent panic attacks and then becoming very worried about having more attacks. So you start to avoid certain triggers. Social anxiety might be anxiety or fear of negative evaluation or judgment from others, or situations where you might be experiencing evaluation in terms of your performance as well. Separation anxiety, so more common in kids but can happen with adults too. So when you feel like something catastrophic will happen to you or your loved one when you separate from them. Got your phobias, so mine's snakes. Generalized anxiety disorder was mentioned before, so this is worry about a lot of different things, but also accompanied by physical experiences as well. So headaches is the most common one, fatigue. Agoraphobia, so this is about situations that would be difficult to escape from or would be very humiliating. So it can manifest in different ways. A lot of people it's for public transport, you can't escape easily, and sometimes generalizes so that people are not leaving their house. And then health anxiety, so you might experience a symptom and you might attribute that to something catastrophic. So I've got a pain, I've got cancer. OCD was mentioned before, I don't have it up there, but that would involve your intrusive thoughts. So let's say it's a contamination fear where you're worried if you touch something, you'll become contaminated or get a disease, and can or cannot be accompanied by compulsions, so behaviours designed to mitigate that fear or that situation from occurring. So it might be washing my hands, but instead of once, I'm going to wash them 20 times. So again, it's got to the point where it's become more destructive or debilitating for people. It's interfering with their quality of life. When we're feeling anxious, this is what's happening in the body. So back in the day when we were cavemen and cavewomen, we needed a really quick system of responding to threat in our environment. So hence we've got the fight or flight response, which I'm sure you've heard of. But what starts to happen with this is that our body prepares us to either run away really quickly or fight something or someone off. So we might start to get tight chest, breathing difficulty. We might feel our heart racing. We might get chest pain. All our digestion shuts down because you don't need to eat when that's happening. So we might get diarrhea or vomiting, nausea or butterflies. All the blood's going into our big muscles, so you might get muscle tension in your back and shoulders, or you might get very tingly or numb in your extremities. So really unpleasant. At its height, it's a panic attack. Sometimes people have multiple panic attacks, say a week. Some people just have a few of these symptoms, but in a chronic kind of ongoing basis. All right, so that's in the body. In terms of what's happening in the mind, usually we start to worry, we start to ruminate. Now worry is meant to be helpful, it's meant to help us problem solve. So if we can attend to all the threats in our environment and come up with a way of a solution for them or a way of dealing with them, that's great. Often though, particularly nowadays, the solution is either out of our control or the likelihood of it occurring is really low. Or there's just no solution to that particular problem. So for example, let's say coming here on the plane today, I started to really worry and ruminate about tripping on my way in front of everyone. And maybe I started to worry about it so much that I lost sleep the last 3 nights. And maybe that impacted my concentration and my fatigue levels. So really, apart from attending to what's going on in front of my feet, it's probably pretty low that I'm going to trip. The likelihood is pretty low. And even if I do, well, there's not much I can do about that. So the amount of time I might have spent ruminating about that was probably not of help to me and started to interfere with my functioning. Does that make sense so far? Okay. All right, so this is when anxiety becomes unhelpful or dysfunctional or maladaptive. So when we either overestimate the likelihood of an event occurring, so it's pretty rare that I'm going to trip, but in my head I'm thinking it's 100% certain it's going to happen. Underestimating our ability to cope with the event. So let's say I did trip, how would you react?
As us reacting to you, well, we're probably going to help you.
You'd probably go help. So you won't point and laugh and go, you stupid idiot. So even if that occurred, probably most people are nice. They'd come and help, maybe help me up, see if I'm okay. Okay, I might be a bit embarrassed, but I could probably still do the presentation and survive, and it'd be okay. It can become unhelpful when it interferes with our ability to function, so sleep or concentrate or perform our work or home duties. Or if one particular anxiety generalizes to a lot of different situations. So maybe I'm starting to think about tripping when I go home, when I go to work, when I go to the shops. So it's starting to get a bit out of control. So now I guess to the impact on the carer. So sometimes people are carers just because of the relationships, so their parents or partners or friends. Sometimes people can find themselves being the carer because that's kind of their role in life and they're not used to a different way of doing things. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail a bit later. Anyway, either way, the carer, these are some common things that can occur. So stress can be one, compassion fatigue can be another. So this is when your resources for empathy and compassion get depleted. And then you might find you don't have enough left to be as supportive as you like to be. So at an extreme, I guess it would be like getting really irritable and angry and I guess telling people to shut up when they're talking to you about their anxiety and that type of thing. That's more extreme. On a less intense level, it might just be kind of a drained, exhausted type of feeling. Burnout would be your endpoint worst case scenario. So this is when there hasn't been lots of opportunities to recover from the stress, and basically people's bodies or their minds kind of shut down for them. Or it might just interrupt their functioning, so their ability to carry out social work engagements. First of all, what is stress? So stress is when your demands outweigh your resources. So your demands might be your work, projects or deadlines, keeping in shape, maintaining your relationships, might be legal proceedings going on, paying bills, and can also be internal pressures you put on yourself as well. We all need a little bit of stress to survive and thrive, and we can all manage a little bit of stress. Humans actually built well to manage a little bit of stress. If we don't have any stress, we tend to get bored and then we get depressed. So we do need a little bit of stimulation, but too much, and that's when we can get chronic stress or burnout. So as long as we have a recovery period, we can manage stress. If we don't have recovery, then it can really start to affect our physical and mental health. So I mentioned burnout before. Burnout, let's say, for some people it might manifest as, say, chronic fatigue, so physically. Some people it might manifest as a mental health or emotional concern like depression. Previously kind of thought of as a breakdown. When people said they had a breakdown, that's probably what was happening. So essentially, if you're not getting your recovery in, your body says, fine, I'm going to make you recover by completely shutting you down. So stress, if it's a very extreme stress like trauma, it can really impact the immune system for up to about 10 years after the initial event. So it can affect the body if we don't tend to our stress levels appropriately. So these are some warning signs for stress. So if you're feeling mildly stressed, it might look like feeling restless, some sleep problems, so trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep, some changes in your appetite, so maybe you've lost your appetite or maybe you're eating more or more junk food. Some digestive disturbances, so diarrhea or constipation, and neck or shoulder tension or headaches. When it's getting into the moderate range, then you might find yourself becoming more emotionally reactive, angry, or lashing out, crying and feeling very overwhelmed. You might also start to experience headaches or migraines that require painkillers for them to go away. And you might find yourself withdrawing socially. If it's severe, then you might start to see more physical problems like ulcers and infections. So this is when the immune system is sort of quite depleted, so it can't fight off other things. You might find increased desire to escape, so you might start fantasizing about how to get out of the situation. So some people might fantasize about becoming just sick enough to go to hospital for a while, but it's not life-threatening, just so they can get some time. I guess in a more detrimental way, people can start having suicidal thoughts, increased use of substances to cope. So you might find people drinking 4 coffees to get through the day and then having 4 drinks to get to sleep at night or more. And then you might find some personality change. So your loved ones or people around you might start saying things like, you've changed, you're different, I don't even know you anymore, what's happened to you? So there's been an impact on the psyche at that level. So that's just about monitoring things. So again, mild stress, that's okay. You're probably okay. If it's getting moderate, severe, something bigger needs to happen. You need to come up with some other ideas on how to cope or some new solutions, or ask for help for that. I've got the oxygen mask there. When you're on a plane, they always tell you put your own mask on first, then help everyone else. So same thing applies. The more things you can do for yourself, the more you can take care of yourself, the easier it'll be to take care of everyone else around you, or the more you'll have to give to everyone else. Making room for emotions, monitoring those stress levels, planning your recovery and respite, thinking about your support team, considering boundaries and responsibility, and considering self-compassion. One of the best things you can do is to make a lot of space for the emotions you might have when you're looking after someone or supporting someone going through some challenging times. So I'm not saying you have to tell them about it. In fact, that's not a good idea. But make space within yourself or find someone else you can talk to about it. So it's normal to feel frustration at times. You just want to help them, and sometimes you want to shake them and say, just, you're great, you're fine, you can do it. But they're not ready to. That's okay, that's where it's at. But you're bound to feel a bit of frustration in those moments. You might feel anxiety yourself. You might be worried about how they're coping, or if they have some kind of a big event or a big trigger coming up, you might start to worry about how they'll feel, how they'll cope. You might feel some disappointment or loss. So you might feel some grief that they're not having the happy experience, or they're having this struggle with anxiety. That's normal. And from time to time, you might get a sense of hopelessness. You might think, oh, I don't know what else to do here. All normal. All you have to do is make space for them. So for some people, it might be journaling. Some people, it might be talking, processing it through with somebody else. So whether that's a professional or non-professional support. Some people like to channel it. So say you had a really stressful day, you were helping your person tackle an exposure task. It was pretty intense, and you got a lot of pent-up adrenaline, and you might go for a big long run, and that helps you process it, helps you get it all out. Okay, so we've talked about stress levels. And really, this is about when to take a break. So you will need some recovery time to manage stress, daily, weekly, and in a longer sense, so like a holiday. So daily, it might be, let's say it's the kids have gone to bed and you get some time for yourself, some alone time. Or it might be weekly that you always go to your book club on a Thursday night by yourself. So this is just making sure you're doing activities, whether that's restful or social or fun, that help fill up your bucket, help fill up your resources to continue to cope. For some people, it's like resting in a sedentary way, so movies or reading. Some people will need activity or social stimulation to recharge, so it depends on what's best for you. I'm not sure if anyone's in this situation, but if you're in a situation where, say it's disability and you feel like you cannot leave them, longer term, you might need to work with your support team around finding a good respite person so that you can take a break by yourself. Okay, speaking of support team, so really the more the merrier. The more you can rely on other people, then the more shared the responsibility or the stress levels are. So whether that's mental health support, or NDIS, or support workers, charities, friends, or it might be other carers, or it might be enlisting your own mental health support, someone you can talk to and debrief with. So all psychologists have their own psychologist. They have a supervisor that they talk to about lots of things. So it might be debriefing about cases that have been quite kind of traumatic or stressful, or it might be advice on how to help, or it might be talking about personal stresses that have come up in their life. And really, it's invaluable. It helps you to keep going. So I wouldn't be able to keep working if I didn't have a supervisor looking after me. Boundaries and responsibility. So I mentioned the carer role before. Now, usually carers tend to be high on empathy. They're highly attuned and responsive to other people's needs, and they're really good at regulating other people's emotions. So because they're so competent at it, they find themselves in these situations more and more. Now, sometimes, I guess that those sets of qualities or traits can come about in different ways. Sometimes it's sort of born that way. Sometimes people go through trauma, which makes them highly attuned, highly sensitive. Sometimes they're conditioned to that role in their family environment. So they learn that that's their role, that's what they do in relationships. And sometimes it's just simply you're the one in charge. You're the parent, you're the teacher, you're the person in that position. And of course, partners sort of tends to be a bit part of the deal as well. So those are lovely qualities you don't have to change. Beautiful, wonderful, wonderful people, carers. All we have to do is manage them and put boundaries in place around them. So sometimes for carers, they can start to feel overly responsible for the other person. So it's all up to me to help them to get better. And that can create a lot of stress on you because so much of it's out of your control. So much of it can be down to the other person. It can also make you feel like you have to control a lot of situations. So we mentioned before the question. So that's to try and, okay, let me try and problem solve. What can we do? Like, how can I make you feel better right now? And that's fairly overwhelming. Or it can manifest in different ways. So classic example would be controlling what you eat. Some people it's controlling their environment, so organising things or cleaning things. Lots of different ways it can come out. Self-sacrifice is the other big thing that starts to occur. So you put so much time and effort into looking after someone that you start to sacrifice your own needs. And you could argue that carers inherently have to do that a little bit to be a carer. But when does it become too much? When is your oxygen mask no longer on the plane? It's just completely gone. So in order to kind of manage these ones, it's important to think about the boundary of what's in your control and what's not. What's up to me, what's up to them, or even their support team. And what are my values around this? So it might be important to you to show your loved one that you care about them and that you understand they're feeling anxious. And that can be part of your values. But is it your job to fix them? No. And really, bad things happen to people, unfortunately, and all you can do is be there for them to help pick up the pieces. You can't stop the bad things from occurring in the first place. So it's kind of having that in the front of your mind and think, okay, what's in my control, what's my responsibility? Those two questions can just help you manage the stress levels. The other side of this, I guess, is about making sure your needs are being met, making sure you've got time for your recovery and your respite, and challenging any guilty feelings about that when that comes in. So that is perfectly acceptable and healthy to do. while you might be learning that question as a carer, they might also be learning that lesson, going through that experience themselves, you know. It's a journey. Next up is self-compassion, and I'm going to do an exercise in self-compassion at the end. So this is about caring for yourself. So you're really good at extending empathy and concern and compassion to the person you're looking after. It's all about flipping that onto yourself in moments when you feel great pain or suffering or stress. These are more tips, kind of practical tips for helping someone with anxiety. So once again, it really depends on their stage of change and their capacity. So a 30-year-old might have more capacity than a 14-year-old. Or maybe some people might be ready to change and they'll do anything they can. Or maybe they're still feeling quite ambivalent or worried about, can they do it? What will that mean? It doesn't feel like I could do it. I don't know if I have the confidence to do it. So probably the best thing is really collaborating with your person about what's going to be helpful and making it like you're a team against the anxiety. So it's not them, it's the anxiety. And you might call it the anxiety, or you might call it a name like old Trev or the critical voice or the meanie or whatever it might be. So you might set a time each week to sit down when everyone's calm, when they're not feeling anxious, to talk about Mr. Anxiety. And that might be, okay, well, you know, where are things at? What are we looking at, or what the goals are? Maybe where things are at in therapy if they're comfortable sharing. And then you might talk through solutions together about what could be helpful in those moments. So let's say you've got someone with social anxiety, and it's sort of coming out when they have to go and meet new people, or they're in social situations, or they're leaving the house. And maybe, you know, next week you've got to go to the doctor together, and that's going to trigger off some anxiety. So you might say, okay, well, let's work through a little plan of how we can cope with this. So we're going to the doctor at this time, and it's in this place, and we're going to drive this direction, and when we get there, what do you think you'll start to feel? Oh, I might feel like short of breath, and the tunnel vision might come on. Okay, so obviously really important that you go to the doctor. So what's going to help you cope in that moment? Okay, well, I'm going to do my breathing, and I'm going to play on my iPhone to kind of distract myself. Okay, great. Now, what do you want me to do? What's best? So if you're starting to feel worked up, should I ignore it and leave you alone? Should I say, are you okay? Should I say, should we go for a walk? So really what you're doing is letting the person you're caring for coach you in what would be helpful. Now this might take a while to figure out, might take a few conversations, and again depends where they're at. But things that I've found helpful for people in the past, one is the traffic light symptoms. So you have your red, yellow and green. If I'm green, everything's fine, I'm good. So we're just going to go about our usual normal day. If I say to you I'm yellow, it means starting to have some anxiety come up. I'm not feeling quite safe. And when I'm feeling yellow, I'd really love you to come and give me a hug at that point, or just sit next to me. Okay. However, if I'm red, maybe I'm having a panic attack at that moment, and maybe what I need is no stimulation. So maybe I need a timeout. I need you to go away. I'm going to calm myself down. Then when I'm feeling yellow, maybe I can have a cuddle then. Obviously it looks different for different people, but it's just a quick system. So instead of people saying, what's going on, what's wrong, what can I do? You might say yellow or red. And they're like, okay, got it. So I guess it's a way of building up that communication, because different things will be helpful to different people. And really, when it's happening in the moment is not a good time to talk through a solution, because basically your frontal lobe shut down when you're anxious and you can't think straight. You might talk about, okay, well, let's say you're doing this exposure task. You're kind of pushing yourself to do something that makes you feel anxious. When should I encourage? Like, when should I be like, come on, you can do it? And when should I stop? When is that going to feel like too much for you? You might talk about things that would be helpful or unhelpful to say. So it might be, okay, well, when you're feeling stressed or anxious, what are the most helpful things I've ever said to you? What are the least helpful things I've ever said to you? Okay, why? Why is that? Yep, okay. And you just keep making a note of what the best things to say. You might also start to have this time to discuss boundaries. So you might say, you know what, I need to be in the best place possible so we can work against anxiety together and overcome it together. So what that means is I am going to go to my book club on a Thursday night, no matter what kind of day we've had together tackling anxiety. Is that okay? Can you agree to that? Yeah, I can agree to that. So again, you want to phrase your self-care as what you need to help them battle anxiety together.
Care needs is really the focus. Often is the child.
Yeah.
But it's just not the carer.
And look, you might agree with this. It can be nice for the person with anxiety to feel like they can look after the other person for a change, you know, and the other person can say, oh, I'm kind of struggling here. And the person with anxiety can be like, oh, how can I help you with that, you know, if they're old, and it's not different for kids, but
I suppose it gives them some value in that relationship. Like, okay, but I can start to deal with some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got control over that.
Yeah, I can help my carer by letting them go to book club or understanding what they need. Yeah. You might spend that time practicing techniques together, breathing techniques or meditation techniques. So it's going to help both of you if you're doing your breathing together. And I guess outside of that kind of sit-down time, it can also be helpful to, this one's about, I guess, pulling back on responsibility. So encourage your person to do tasks that they're competent at. So often, we've started to kind of support them in every area of their life. Cleaning, calling up the GP to make an appointment. And even though that might feel kind of nice short term for the person experiencing anxiety, long term it's going to suffer in terms of their competence. So you might say, okay, I'm going to definitely help you with the social aspects of anxiety. So calling to make the appointment, or I'm going to come with you to the GP. But you can definitely make dinner 3 times a week, and I'll make dinner 4 times a week. Does that one make sense? And really important, spending quality time together where anxiety is not the focus. So if it has become quite debilitating, it can take over everything. But really, you know, to keep working at it together, you really need to keep your bond going, those loving, positive feelings. So, it doesn't have to be big. It can just be watching a movie together, or playing a game together, or going for a walk together. Anything you both enjoy that's going to increase that bonding time. All right, so I'm going to take you through a self-compassion exercise now. So I'll get you to close your eyes, get comfy in your chair, feet flat on the floor, and hands just resting in your lap. And just take a few moments to focus on your breathing. And I just want you to think of a time when you felt a sense of inadequacy or personal failure or suffering when it comes to your person. First of all, I just want you to make some space for the emotions you were feeling at that time. So maybe it was worry or frustration or hopelessness. And just take a moment to breathe and let those emotions be there. And then just let those emotions wash away, wash over you. And just place a hand over your heart. And just tell yourself that for this person, you're not the cause of their suffering, nor is it completely within your power to take all the suffering away. Just like you, they were a child once too. Just like you, they have strengths and difficulties, dreams and fears. Just like you, they can make mistakes and have successes. Just take a moment to acknowledge how difficult that moment was for you at that time. So you might say something to yourself like, that was a really bad day. That was really tough. And then think of something very kind you can say to yourself. So maybe it's, what you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. Or it's okay if you're not okay all the time. And just spend a few more minutes breathing and engaging in some more kindness towards yourself. And just focus back on your breathing. Notice your body in the chair, your feet on the floor. And just when you're ready, just opening your eyes. Okay, what was that like for you? Calming, that's good. Soothing. Mm-hmm. So again, you're used to doing it for everyone else, just flipping it back onto yourself. So this is a free stress program. There's also this website, Support for Carers. It has a lot of different resources there you can use. And if you want some more self-compassion exercises, selfcompassion.org. It's a good one. Okay, that's really all. Thanks very much.